In many places in the world today, yesterday, they indicate, I wouldn't say the word celebrate, but indicate the Holocaust Day, Yom HaShoah. And there's no words to describe really what happened during the Holocaust in Europe. And I don't think it could be ever be atoned for what was done there. And really outrageous to me is this today, Nazism and anti-Semitism and so on and so forth is back in style in Europe. I mean, it's really outrageous. Together with that, there are other issues that need to be dealt with the Holocaust. For example, when you say the word Holocaust or Shoah, right away you get a picture in your mind maybe of the Warsaw Ghetto or some shtetl in Europe and in Poland or something like that. People are not aware that there were Jews, for example, from Tunisia or Libya transferred to the death camps. And completely people neglect what was done to the Greek Jews, especially in the city called Saloniki. And this is almost like an institutional disease as well, because if you're going to go, and I'm by the way, what I'm going to tell you now is basically I'm quoting information from a book and some of my own experience. If you go to the archives or this library of Yad Vashem, which is it's a Israeli Holocaust museum, call it this way. There are 115,000 books on the Holocaust. There's only 34 under the volume Greece. And there are only 17 books, including all kind of research that people do and so on and so forth, on the city Saloniki. The latest one is from 1999 or so. There's nothing, nobody's really interested in that. On the city Lodz in Poland, there are 106 books. 28 of them were written since the beginning of the 21st century. Saloniki was established at the year 315 BCE. And Jews settled then from the 3rd century and on. Maybe there are 2.5 pamphlets on the whole city like that. On Vilna, that was established in the 12th century. There's 4 times more information than there is on the city of Saloniki. There's a lot of unknown altogether about Sfaradim altogether, but especially what happened there during the Holocaust. People are completely ignorant of that part of the Jewish nation. People think that there are 2 nations. There are Sfaradim and there are Ashkenazim. They don't understand they all came from one place, dispersed all over the world, and they're still the same people, but however, it seems that there are 2 nations. There are Sfaradim and there are Ashkenazim. Unfortunately. And people don't know that Saloniki was the second at the time port city in Europe. Was the biggest port city in the Balkans. It used to be called one time Yerushalayim de Balkan. Jerusalem of the Balkans. We're talking about enormous numbers of Jews living there, flourishing there for hundreds of years. So if you're going to say, well, what do you want? I mean, in Poland they killed 3 million Jews. It's all a matter of numbers, right? It's all numbers. If it's all numbers, it's not all about numbers. But if it is about numbers, we're going to look at the statistics. 90% of Greek Jews were exterminated. Saloniki was the biggest Sephardic center in Europe until the Holocaust. And between the 16th and 18th century, it was the biggest, I don't let anybody tell you otherwise, the biggest Jewish center in Europe. In terms of Torah, in terms of Jewish life, culture, and everything else that comes up with it. You guys look at me like I fell out of space. You probably don't even know what I'm talking about, because you were never taught that. And I would try today to maybe change that. You need to become more aware. Sephardic Jews altogether are quiet. They're not known for making big noises, and they're not good at promoting themselves. So that was the biggest thing. What happened to the Greek Jews in the Holocaust is horrible. I'm going to try to show you a little bit now. There is a book written by Putni Tomai. It's called Greeks in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And she is the historical archives and diplomatic manager of the Greek Foreign Ministry. Over there are testimonies, pictures, documents. And they came out, and especially need to know, because the Greeks were and still are very anti-Semites. The Christian Greeks are extremely anti-Semites. Today, anti-Semitism and neo-Nazis first of all, what is this thing, neo-Nazis? Nazis. Neo-Nazis. The same thing. Is at outrageous numbers. It's unbelievable what's going on in Greece. Now, so before the Nazis took over Saloniki, there were 77,000 Jews that lived there, and in Greece they were arranged in 25 different communities, which the biggest one, of course, is called Yerushalayim de Balkan. Jerusalem of the Balkans was in Saloniki, or they used to call her Saloniki Ir Vaem B'Israel. Is a legitimate city in the nation of Israel. It was so big, the port, that the port was closed on Shabbat. The Jews that worked there ran the port. It was closed on Shabbat. Imagine today even in Israel, ports are not closed on Shabbat. In Saloniki, it was closed on Shabbat. I'll give you some names of Jews that live there. Talking about Maharshdam, talking about Mahar Bet Yosef that lived there. Numerous Gdolei Israel, Atzmot Yosef, all the great rabbis. They were the influence, by the way, which is something also that is neglected, the influence of Sephardic yeshivot in Saloniki was so great on the Litvish yeshivot that it's completely disregarded, but nevertheless they were influenced by them. The Chacham Tzvi from Amsterdam called himself Chacham Tzvi because he went to Saloniki and he saw himself, there were great people there. Rabbi Yosef Taitzek, the list is enormous. And we don't know about it. And so not only we buried any remnant of an acknowledgement of, God forbid, there were big Sephardi rabbis who live in Saloniki. Saloniki was a major city. We also buried their memory of whatever happened to them in the Holocaust. And that's something that we cannot atone for. And the Sephardim should awake themselves. Don't feel second class. You're not second class. And there are places like Shuvi Nafshi is a place in your Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, publishing house. They put up books of Sephardim or what's his name? This big rabbi in Israel. Avad Shalom. Right? They also put books of Sephardim because they became out of style, but they put them out. I don't know what to tell you. It's a crime. The disacknowledgement of Sephardic contribution to Jewish life. It's a crime. And Saloniki had at the time, about 60,000 Jews that lived there. Most of them were people who were exiled from Spain. At the time, Saloniki was a part of the Ottoman Empire. It was a very cosmopolitan city. In Saloniki, there were Jews and Christian, Greek Orthodox. There were Gypsies. There were Turks. There were Armenians. It was a big city. Everybody lived in Saloniki. Everybody lived there, and gave it a tremendous color of its own. There was a tremendous cultural aspect to Saloniki as well. The women of Saloniki were dressed up in a very Spanish Jewish way. They kept on that. There's a very distinguished look for the Sephardi women of Saloniki. For example, they used to cover the hair with a head covering. They had like about 3 fingers up, open, exposed. Then they had a head covering. And the braid, they all wore a braid. And the braid went into this like sleeve which they were wearing over the heads. And on top of that, they had a hat. Most of them, their fineries had some kind of like a fur around it. Very modest. They were dressed up. I mean, you could tell right away the influence that came from Spain. They spoke Ladino. Ladino was the language which they maintained and carried over from Spain all the way to Greece. And the culture altogether of that. There were traders, there were businessmen, big rabbis, huge. And, there were also unions, Jewish union, there were groups, there were work and so on and so forth. There were boxers. There were boxers too. There were athletes. They did everything. So there's a famous story about this. I remember, you see, when I was born, my parents, originally my family is from Spain. From Spain, they moved to Saloniki. From Saloniki, they moved to Izmir in Turkey. So when my parents were just married, they didn't have a place to live. So they rented a room in an apartment of 2 Holocaust survivors, Greek Jews from Saloniki. The husband was from Kavala, and therefore his name was Kavalika. His real name is Shabbetai HaKohen, and I love this man as he was my father. And his wife was Dora Cohen. Her family name, her main name was Elimelech. She was a beautiful woman. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her later. She was a beautiful woman. Extremely talented. She spoke something like 7 languages. And read them too. I mean, unbelievable people. So, I lived with these people. And I remember Sabi, Shabtai, I was lucky. I almost had like 2 sets of parents. They were like my parents. Because the wife could not bear children, and I'll tell you why. So I was their child too. So this guy Sabi used to tell me about this Greek guy, Jewish Greek guy. His name was Mechista. Mechista is like Hercules. He was a Jewish boxer. They used to walk around in Saloniki with his chest open like this, with a big Magen David in the middle. And nobody dared to talk to him. Those boxers, by the way, gave later on a little bit of another drop of life to the prisoners in Saloniki, because Jews and Christians used to watch them, coming to watch them box, while the SS used to arrange those boxing matches. So they needed to keep them alive as entertainers, like gladiators. So they gave them another chance of living. And it was amazing to see those Spanish Jews, those Jewish boxers, fighting against Ukraine monsters in the ring and beating the daylight out of them. And they were winning against all odds. They were different Jews. These are the Jews that you know. Those Jews were a unique phenomena in European Jewry. They weren't weak. They weren't isolated. And they didn't need to choose between religion and education. They were immersed in the cosmopolitan harmony of Saloniki, and they were able to combine Safra and Saifa, body and mind and soul. And it was said about Saloniki that there was no other city like that in the world, including Israel, the land of Israel. And you know who wrote that? Whoever wrote that testimony that there's no other city like that and there aren't Jews like this anywhere in the world was no other than David Ben-Gurion. Because he learned in Saloniki for a year and he was completely impressed by them. However, he quickly forgot about them also, because once they came to Israel, it was a totally different story. And I haven't started telling you yet about the discriminations that my people had suffered when they came to Israel. We were the Negroes of Israel. They used to call the Sephardim Schwarzes, Franks, black people, by the Ashkenazi elite. I know what I'm saying is not politically correct. I know that. I don't really care. The truth is the truth. And it has to be said. And it has to be said today, because today is Yom HaShoah. Today. And we need to know what really happened. What happened was there was increase of nationalism in Greece. Greece won a battle with Turkey. They took over that area. They attacked Turkey with the Bulgarians, and they won the area. And there was exchange of population, because in cities like Izmir, there was a big population of Greek Christians, and there were a lot of Muslims in Turks in Saloniki, so they exchanged population. They did transfer, ethnic cleansing. Of course, everybody in the world is allowed to do so, besides the Jews. Jews are not allowed to do so, right? Because Israel is not allowed to call itself a Jewish state. I mean, I didn't know that you need to ask other people how to define yourself. A homosexual can call himself a homosexual, that's okay. He's gay, he's a homosexual, he's whatever you want to call him. You know, you can let anybody define themselves whichever way they want, besides the Jews. Israel is not allowed to define itself. We need to ask permission from everybody else. How are we going to define our country? It's ridiculous. So when the Greeks came, it was a rise of nationalism in that. And of course the Jews suffered, the economy went down, and so on and so forth. But what they did was, because of that, a lot of Greek Jews joined the Communist Party. They arranged soldiers that were fighting the Nazis. There were Jewish Greeks who fought against the Nazis. We don't know that. There were soldiers that were fighting against the Nazis, not like in Poland. They fought. I remember this woman, Alea Shalom Dora, told me about her brother. They came from the front. He was coming as a Greek soldier, and he said to her, you better run out because what is coming our way is beyond our capacity. We need to run, and nobody believed him. Now, what happened during World War II, and you should really, I'm not going to cover the whole entire thing because it's beyond the capacity and my ability to do so. You should really, all of you, those who are here, those who are watching, should really do your own research about what happened to the Greek Jews, and to your great astonishment, you might not find much. But I live with these people, and I saw them, and I saw what happened to them, and I saw how they lived, and later on how they died. So nobody can tell me what happened to this. I know because I lived with them. I lived with all of them. There were no Jews like the Jews from Saloniki. They were big. They were massive. They had life in them. They had something in them that kept some of them. Out of the 60,000 Jews in Saloniki, less than 2,000 survived. And Greece was divided between Italy, Germany, and Bulgaria. When they conquer in World War II, when they conquer it. And it was that, I think, Athens fell by the Italians. Saloniki, which most of the Jews were there, the Athenians, the non-Jews, saved a lot of Jews in Athens. They refused to hand them over. A lot of Greek Orthodox priests hid the Jews and helped them escape and hide in monasteries and so on and so on. But that was in Athens. In Saloniki, it wasn't the case. In Saloniki, at the beginning, it was under, I think, Bulgaria. Then it was given to the Germans. They were all connected in. They were all put together into the Germans, and then they started to writing the lists. Germans were known to making very organized lists. They arrange everybody. They put them in ghettos. They label everybody. They knew exactly where everything is going on. All their merchant, everything that you own was taken, confiscated away from you, and they were pushed into the ghetto. And you should know that there were public libraries in Saloniki of Jews that had world treasures in them. It was all looted, stolen, burnt, etc. The shuls of Saloniki, they were for years, they're for hundreds of years, also looted. Then the Germans established a library for research of Jews. You know, they were perplexed by them. In 1943, they had what is so-called the Black Sabbath of July, 1943, where 9,000 of the Jews, of the men from the ages of 18 on 45, on Shabbat, were led to the Independence Square, which is a very nice place because it's like a plaza right in front of the Mediterranean or the Balkan, or, you know, again, see whatever the heck it is. And 9,000 people were humiliated with endless exercises. You could see pictures of that, going like this, doing that, all kind of exercises to simply humiliate the Jews on a hot day of July in front of the ocean and a burning sun, a whole entire day of humiliation. You can look at pictures, you can find them. And many, many more, many more. Now, what is interesting that is in a way at the beginning somewhat the different treatment of Germans towards the Jews of Greece, of Saloniki. For example, the Germans entered Saloniki in April 1941, but all the rulings against the Jews were executed only at the end of January 1943, because they didn't really know how to deal with the Levant Jews, with the Sephardic Jews. They were different. And they realized that there's a difference between the Ashkenazi Jews and the Sephardic Jews in terms of their looks and their attitudes and so on and so forth. But there was one wicked Greek man, let me show you the name of this lowlife, Sikris Papanom, and he wrote a complaint to the German consulate, and it says, in all over the countries of Europe and the Balkans, for a long time already, steps were taken against the Jews, and to turn the Jews into a to make them become rodents. It says, only in Greece, and especially in Saloniki, the Jews were left unharmed. He was complaining. So therefore, in March 15th, 1943, the first transfers of Jews from Auschwitz went on its way. And as a result of that, 19 more transfers were going, and there were about, each transfer had about 2,800, 3,000 people in it, all packed into cattle cars with no food and with 2 buckets, one for water and other ones for human discharges. And that journey, they had one stop. That journey took 7 days. And for many of them, the extermination already took place on the trains themselves. Many died on the trains. Many. Now, you might say, at least they came to the camps. And in the camps, everybody suffered the same. Jews were Jews, That's what you were taught. However, the Ashkenazim did not believe that they were Jews. The Ashkenazi Jews in the camps did not believe that they are Jews. Why? This is a testimony. This is a testimony from Yitzchak Ini, a survivor. And he writes, why? Because we were strong. We were dark from the sun of Saloniki. They used to look at them and they used to say, "Tfu, those Grecos. Tfu, those Greek Jews." These are the Polish Jews who spoke Yiddish. And we were scared. We were afraid of them. Why? Because we could not distinguish at the time, he says, between German and Yiddish. We thought there was Germans. We didn't understand a word from the SS was yelling at us. And we got hit. And then they talked to us in German. We were afraid. In other words, they were saying there were exile within an exile. Only 524 men and women were taken from the first transfer of Saloniki to a work camp and other devil works of experimental that they were doing there. All the rest was sent to the crematorium to be burnt. The reason is there was a population explosion in Auschwitz in 1943. And as a result of that, there's very little information about them in German documents because they were all sent from the trains to the chimneys. Most of the Jews from Greece found themselves in all the death station, all the death camps of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Before that, those who survived, they were in slave laborers, in Bona camp, at a Zurde Commando. Zurde Commando were those people who their job was to push and to load the bodies of the dead people into the crematorium. The guy that I called my other father, Shabtai Cohen, was a part of them. They are the only ones who actually rebelled against them, and they blew up. People don't know that, but they rebelled against the Nazis in Auschwitz, and they blew up a crematorium. And they also played in the Auschwitz Orchestra. They had a band, they had an orchestra that would play there. But their pride, the inherited pride of the Greek Jews, together with clinching on to their language, Greek, Ladino, their friendship, oh, they were tight. They were tight. With the patriotism, with their cultural unity. They didn't have Hasidim, Mitnagdim, this, this. We're all Jews. Together with the direct ability, an unbelievable ability to sing, that self-irony. They knew how to laugh at themselves. They knew how to laugh. That ability to be hustles. They could create things for themselves. To gain another moment to survive gave them a totally different experience of survival than many other people. And for example, there were Jewish women who worked in what they call the Canada camp, which was, their job was to assort all the looting that the German took from the Jews. So there were, one of the women there, her name is Henrietta Molko from Saloniki. She says about her work there, she said, you know, we needed to survive. Every time that we could, we stole from the Germans. So if we found German bank accounts, we ripped them. We didn't want them to have it so they can loot it. If we found a suitcase with money, we kept it. And then we took this money, we divided it among us, and we paid for other people who had connections on the world outside to buy things for us so we could survive a little bit more. It was a survival thing. They had to survive. The uniqueness also of the Greek Jews were their abilities to sing. Even though that you were not allowed to talk one to another while you work, and the Germans told them not to talk, they weren't allowed to talk, the Germans encouraged them to sing. For the Germans, they were entertainers. Can you do me a favor? Tell them just to lower this a little bit. And they says, we changed the words of the songs that the Germans knew. We changed the words of them in order to give each other messages and to keep our morale higher. So they would take a German tune that they knew, and they would change the word. Because they didn't speak German, so they changed the words. And that is the testimony of a person named Chaguel Leon. He's also from Saloniki. But sometimes that was crucial. That message transfer was crucial. The Germans placed the crematorium far from the rest of the camp, far from the rest of the camp, and they also placed the Zunder Commando, those people who worked there, above the crematoriums, in order so they could keep a secrecy. They didn't want to create an unrest for the people, because there were a lot of people in Auschwitz, so they kept the whole process of burning the Jews quiet. However, a Greek Jew with a strong voice sang one day from crematorium number 6. He said it in Greek or Ladino. He said, Greek maidens, they can hear me. Tra la 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 la. He made a song out of this. He says, here in the chimneys that you see above, there is a factory for horrible death. Thousands of Jews fall into the flames, and I know that I will be burned myself. Greek girls, maidens, please, if you come out of here alive, tell this to the world. That was a testimony from Barry Nehemiah, who worked in this Canada, and she listened to that song, and she said that she'll remember this until the day she dies. I don't understand. How could anybody hate Jews today, especially in Europe? I would shove this in the European face every single day that I can without being apologetic. You keep quiet, it'll happen again. You can't be weak. We have to be strong. Because they're cowards and they go after the weak. And if you'll be strong, they won't. Even if you get hurt, at least deliver to them a punch in which they'll never forget. Don't fall asleep on the job. You're a Jew, you're always going to be hated. But at least shove it in their faces. Call it by the name. I don't understand that. France, who hand over the Jews to be exterminated, today is the #1 place in Europe for anti-Semitism? Why do the Israelis have to be so apologetic about it? They want to exterminate the state of Israel by flooding it up with Arabs. Why don't you pay back everything they owe to the Jewish nation? That brotherhood among the Greek Jews was also known. There were very few people that know about it. The Jews of Saloniki took over many things they could. They were entrepreneurs. They took over working in the kitchen, working in factories. There were testimonies that says that there were Jews that even the Germans would appreciate. They were different. The Polish were afraid of the Greek Jews. And they write, there were 3 years in the camps and they were singing. They were always singing all the time. They always sing and they dance on the floor on their feet. Like junks from the tune that they were singing. They were singing their own death songs, but they always sang. It says, on the 8th transfer, a year after Auschwitz was built, there were already 3,000 Greek Jews inside, and the camp was so big, it was the size of the city of Saloniki. And the work was horrible. They had to dig trenches in the ground to build the camp bigger. It was horrible work that even the great Saloniki Jews eventually barely made it. You couldn't survive more than a month working in building the camp. And there's something else I want to talk to you. Auschwitz was divided into blocks, bunkhouses. And there were 2 notorious bunkhouses. number 10 and number 11. And those two bunks, maybe the most outrageous, atrocious, monstrous acts of humans in the history of humankind were taking place. Many of the women who were tortured in Block 10, that were stationed there, Block 10 was designated as a lab for human testing. They were young. They were women, 17 years old, young Greek women. It was supposedly to check diseases like typhus and cancer. And sometimes companies like Bayer would test medicine on them, but really what was there was worse than that. They were neutering women. There was a monster by the name of Dr. Karl Kluberg, who was in charge of 200 Greek women. Well, first of all, he used to rape them. Some of his victims were Rivka Ari, Dora Cohen, which was like my mother. She was like a mother to me. Buena Bitran, Rachel Morduch, Bela Malach. You know, many times they used to infest their womb and ovaries with pus and any other kind of things, and they would rip their womb from their bodies without even an anesthesia. This woman, Dora, told me what happened to her. They tie her hands to a heating pipe and ripped her womb from her while she was conscious. She, of course, could not bear children after that. The reason why they do, they want to see what happens to a woman's womb after you had infected it with this or that or the other. This is a 17-year-old, beautiful blonde girl. I saw pictures of her that she was able to retrieve from the archive of Saloniki, and I couldn't believe how beautiful this woman was. A 17-year-old girl. And this woman says, they pulled my womb down. They put their hands inside and they ripped it out. She says, I don't know what they did with my womb, but I could never have children after that. This testimony is from a woman named Elvira Colado. Another type of experiment was mummifying people. They chose beautiful Jewish girls with a long nose. It says later on, I saw how they make special masks to match their faces. After a month or so, those girls went up on a train and never to be seen again. They were told they turned into mummies. They mummified them while they're alive. This testimony is from a woman, Germaine Mano. She was torture in Block 10. But maybe the most outrageous of all, experimental, medical experiments they did there, was, by the way, it was hidden for years by the French government, what is called the Starthof incident. 10 years, the German reporter, Dr. Hans-Joachim Lang, worked on it until he was able to expose it. And it was 86 prisoners from Auschwitz, 46 among them were women and men from Saloniki, were sent to those labs of Dr. Hirt, which was a Swiss citizen that joined the SS and was nominated to be the manager of those anatomic labs of the School of Medicine of Strasbourg. He had a plan in which he had an idea to teach. So in 1942, Hirt began to do this, and he went to Himmler, and he wanted to ask for some funding and supply of well-preserved human corpses. In other words, that they were not shot. And Hirt gave another condition: the heads of the body needs to be in great condition, because they wanted to display them in glass display boxes in the university. Himmler agreed, and in June 1943, his assistants came to Block 10 in order to take those display items. Those chosen people were sent to Balsas concentration camp, which was nearby the Hotel Starthof. In that hotel refrigerator, they transformed that hotel refrigerator into a gas chamber. And from there, they were sent to a lab that Hirt himself decapitated the heads and later on presented them in a glass display boxes. Later on, Hirt dismembered the bodies and put them with containers with what you call this thing? All kind of like preserves, to preserve them. Formaldehyde and other stuff. And he was waiting for a special machine in Germany which was supposed to come and remove human skin. Why? Because the purpose was to remove the bones from the bodies and to examine the skeletons and to present them in his lectures. But instead of this machine came the release, and the bodies were buried in a mass grave in the graveyard of Strasbourg. Here it committed suicide, and some of his victims was Emma Amar, Israel Albert, David Akuni, Miriam Matalon, Nati Aruch, and so on and so forth. Those people who came out of the Holocaust, even the Greek Jews, living with them was an experience, because they lived life after that. Oh, they lived life. Oh, I remember that. Every night they would open a table with food, music, they dance. But this dance had no joy. They danced with pain. They danced with tears. This guy, Sabi, told me when he was sent to the transfer, got off the train, he had his brother. He had a lot of brothers. He had like 12 brothers. But his big brother was next to him. So he was a big, strong man. So bigger than me. They all asked to be undressed. And when the monster who was in charge of the selection looked at him, he saw he has a little pimple on his rear end, an ingrown hair. He said to him, "You go to this line." So he told him, "Sabi, come with me." So Sabi said to him, "No, I'm here, whatever. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going where I'm going." His brother was sent to the chimneys that day. He survived. I was like a child to him. When I would walk with him in the street, he would tell everybody, this is my son. This man was bigger than life. And he didn't talk a lot about it. He did not talk a lot about it. But in older age, he talked to me about it. He told me about things that happened to him there. I'll tell you a story that my mother told me. When I was born into this house, after I was born, one day my mother went to look for me and I wasn't in a crib. I was a baby, 3 months old. And she saw that this woman, Dora, was trying to nurse me. Of course, she didn't have milk because she couldn't have milk. But she wanted a baby nurse from her. My mother did not say a word. She turned around, she didn't see her, and she let her later on. She put me back into the crib. But these people did, those Germans did to these people, they took their life out of them, they took their life out of us. You have no idea what pain it is. When they came to Israel, they came from one horrible thing into the other, because they were dropped off as the Ma'apilim. They over boat across, and they were escaped, they were ran, they were illegals. 1945, whatever, 46, they came to Israel. The British, who created the biggest mess in history, did not let the Jews who fled Auschwitz, they did not let them in, the British. And now the British had something to say about the Jews in their homeland? Shame on you! They didn't save us. Not only they didn't save us, after we were saved, they didn't let us in. So they came, and then the independence war had started in Israel. And Sabi and many others were sent to fight in Gush Etzion. Gush Etzion was surrounded by the Jordanian legion, and they were taken in captivity. And I asked him, Sabi, why in the world did you go to fight? You just came from the world. He says, because I'm going to die with a gun in my hand. He said the bullets were finished when they had bullets. I was beating them I was clubbing